Hello, welcome to our next section of notes in Unit 2. This one is entitled War Strategy in Valley Forge. We're going to be talking mainly about what is happening in 1777 and 1778. So first of all, we do have a vocabulary term here, strategy. So strategy is a plan of action to follow. And in 1777, the British strategy, or the English strategy, was to cut off New England, or the New England area, from the rest of the colonies. So if we look at this map here, what they were trying to do is march down here and hopefully cut off the New England colonies from the rest of the colonies. This would be a lot easier back then. You'd cut off supply chains, those types of things. They were going to do this by having General Burgoyne come down, essentially the area where Lake Champlain is and Lake George. This is the state of New York here. And then they were also going to have another British regiment come down, and they were going to meet right here in this area, right about where Albany, New York is at today. So John Burgoyne was the British general in the north. He was known as Gentleman Johnny. He kind of had a reputation for living large and kind of enjoying life a lot. So he is marching down from the north, and here's a very stunning portrait of John Burgoyne. Burgoyne's plan is to march south and meet the other British forces that are moving from the west. He also plans on the Loyalists and Native Americans in this area to help him. That particular plan does not really materialize for the British. So a major battle is going to take place at Saratoga, New York. This is in September and October of 1777. A lot of times they actually refer to it as the battles of Saratoga because it's not just one specific one. There's actually two battles within 18 days apart from each other. And the Americans are able to win the second of these major battles and declare a victory in the Battle of Saratoga. So this is where Saratoga is at. This is, again, New York up here. Here's Lake Ontario, just kind of giving you an idea where we're at. New York City is going to be to the south of this. Now, the Battle of Saratoga is often referred to as the turning point of the war, and that's one of the concepts you're going to need to know for your map test as far as the significance of the Battle of Saratoga. The reason why Saratoga is so important is this is a traditional battle fought between the British and the Continental forces. The Americans are able to win, and by winning this battle, it convinces both France and Spain to formally join the colonies in the war and to become our allies. So we've been waiting for something to really kind of convince these other countries to officially join us in the war. We feel like this is probably one of the major steps in actually winning the war is getting their help. We'll talk a little bit later about what we're going to be able to get from France and Spain and the different advantages that this affords us. But this is really important. The Battle of Saratoga is really important because it's kind of the tipping point, and it convinces Spain and France to join us as allies. So now we're going to get things like additional funding. We're able to get some money from those countries, supplies, and especially from the French, naval support. So we don't really have that strong of a navy yet. We're now going to be able to use the power of the French Navy against the British. The British have always had an advantage in this war on the seas. Now it's going to be neutralized a little bit by the French army coming in to help us. So that's why Saratoga is such an important war, or such an important battle in this war. Now, Washington and his men need to set up camp and basically kind of wait out the winter of 1777. In this particular time period, a lot of times armies are not fighting in the wintertime. So here's Valley Forge, just a little bit outside of Philadelphia. And that is where Washington and his men decide to set up camp. Washington has about 7,000 men. They reach Valley Forge in about December of 1777. Valley Forge is not a town, it's not a city. They basically create quarters for their troops by building huts, by building essentially a fortified city just for the wintertime. Now, Washington's men at this point had very few supplies. They lack food. They don't have good shelter to live in. Disease is going to be spread throughout camp. It's going to affect a lot of men in camp that particular winter. Here is a reconstructed cabin at Valley Forge. They built over 2,000 of these huts. So imagine basically a countryside, hillside being transformed into really a small city by building 2,000 of these huts. Now, within each one of these huts, there would be a large number of men staying over the winter. So here you can kind of see how the sleeping arrangements were. So they would typically fit like 10 or more men in each one of these huts. You can begin to see where if one person gets sick, how it would pretty easily spread to the next person. So that's one of the reasons that disease becomes such an important thing, is you have a lot of men living in these small quarters and having to stay in the same huts as each other. So they have reconstructed some of these at Valley Forge. This is not, they obviously haven't reconstructed all 2,000, but from this small picture, you can kind of get an idea for what these might have looked like. The smaller hut here, this is actually for some storage and supplies and stuff. That's not actually a full size hut as the other ones are. And then this is the home that George Washington stayed in. Martha actually came down and stayed that winter with him. But they were, a lot of times the generals were able to utilize some of the homes in the area. And this is at Valley Forge today if you'd like to tour that. So 25% of Washington's men at Valley Forge died. Amazing amount of casualties, not fighting a battle, but from things like malnutrition, not having enough to eat, exposure to the elements, and then also disease. The diseases in particular that affected them that winter were smallpox and typhoid fever. And we've talked a little bit in class about how they tried to prevent smallpox and a little bit about George Washington's history and how he does not have to really worry too much about getting smallpox because he had it at an earlier age. Now, it's also important to note that since you have an army and you have military regulations, if somebody just decides to leave and go home, that is considered desertion. Okay, so if you desert the army and just leave to go home and you don't have permission, that is grounds for court-martialing and then also in some cases execution. And unfortunately, Washington did have several of his own troops executed in front of his other men when they were caught for desertion, because he definitely wanted to send a message that they were not going to tolerate people leaving and deserting the army. So it's a very tough time because you have a lot of people that are very desperate to just leave, but it actually is not within the regulations. All right, one of the most important things that happens at Valley Forge is the bringing on of a soldier by the name of Baron von Steuben. Baron von Steuben at one point served in the Prussian army, or at least that was the story. He's trained in European military styles, very much into regulation and training and being very specific about how you do things. So instead of just waiting there for the entire winter and doing nothing, Baron von Steuben begins to train Washington's men to become more efficient and professional soldiers. Most of these men had never had any formal military training in their lives. So, for example, one thing that Baron von Steuben teaches them is how to use the bayonets effectively in a battle, how to try and cut down the time period in which they load their rifles and muskets and things. So he's teaching them during the wintertime how to actually work as a unit, how to march, how to use the weapons they have more effectively. And this becomes very important because they become much better soldiers as a result of this. One of the models that Baron von Steuben uses is he takes a model company of soldiers. So he takes like 100 soldiers and he trains them and drills them. And then those 100 go out and then they each train a specific number of men. And it all just kind of begins to snowball and filter through the entire group of 7,000 men. So they're not trying to train 7,000 men at one time. That really wouldn't be effective. They're training a specific group that then goes out and trains even more men, and then those people train other people, and that's how they're able to train the entire group that's at Valley Forge. So the important thing about Valley Forge really is that they're able to become better trained, they're more well equipped, and they're a better fighting force after being there the winter at Valley Forge. All right, so that is our notes on Unit 2, War Strategy and Valley Forge. Thanks.